Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. And it's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Andrew Roszko, who is Senior Vice President at Descartes. And today we're going to talk about cracking the code on home delivery. Now, home delivery is a topic that's been generating a lot of buzz, over the past year, and striking a lot of conversations in supply chain logistics circles. Even last week, we just saw in the Wall Street Journal reporting that Amazon is kind of putting more effort and more investment on building out its delivery network. So it's something that week in, week out is something that is getting more and more discussed. And certainly it's great to have Andrew here today to really talk about this timely and important topic and get his view and perspective on what's happening out there on this front. Before we dive into the conversation, I just want to remind you that part of our goal here at Talking Logistics is to make this interactive. So, as we're having our conversation here, if you are joining us live and you want to ask Andrew a question, you can do so via the Submit a Question button. If you are joining us as a visitor, you will have to register first before you can submit a question. And with that, Andrew, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Andrew, just like before we dive into the topic, I always like to ask my guests, how they got involved in the supply chain logistics industry, because I find that in some cases there's some common threads, in other cases it's kind of a unique journey to getting into this industry. So, why don't you briefly, tell us a little about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics, and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Descartes.
Sure, I think the short answer is random coincidence in terms of how I got involved. But as a little bit of a background, I'm actually a software engineer by education. So started my career path in consulting, and really just came across an opportunity, saw a market opportunity with managing private fleets of vehicles. I think back then, there wasn't a lot of mobility involved. There was kind of legacy point solutions to do routing, kind of install the CD, and SaaS was the word cloud hadn't quite been invented yet, but software as a service was becoming more prevalent. So started off and circa late 90s, early 2000s with the dot-com boom. I think it was the era of the startups. So started a SaaS company to attempt to solve the problem of routing and mobility for private fleets, manufacturers, retailers, distributors. So we founded a company called CubeRoot and carried along that journey until Descartes acquired us in 2006. So I had a variety of roles along the way. I always like to say I think I've had every job in a software company to get to this point. And today I'm responsible for the North American business at Descartes.
Yeah, interesting background. So, a lot of the folks that we talk to, start out maybe in manufacturing or start out in engineering. Certainly, we do have a few like yourself that start out in the software industry and coming at it from solving a very particular problem within that. And I certainly remember CubeRoot. I think we go back now over a decade now since we first started talking, and it's certainly been interesting to see how that market has evolved. All right, so let's get into the topic now. Like I mentioned in my opening comments, a lot of buzz around home delivery today. Many retailers are looking at last mile logistics as a competitive differentiator. You see, I mentioned Amazon, but you've got Walmart, you've got eBay, you've got Google, you've got a whole host of companies really looking at this and kind of trying to figure it out, or like we said in the title here, trying to crack the code on this. And while many retailers are kind of see the opportunities, I think many of them are also discovering that that there are real challenges involved. So, to start out, what are some of the big challenges associated with home delivery?
Um, I I don't know that a lot of retailers think about it as a competitive advantage. I think a lot of them still think of it as an unfortunate necessary evil in terms of last mile home delivery. Um, yeah, so there would be a laundry list here, but I think maybe at a real macro level. So you mentioned Amazon, at the top. I mean, so in this world of kind of specialized large format home delivery, so you think of appliances, electronics, furniture, the kitchen cabinets for your house, this type of thing. Um, I think there's a little bit of a historical perspective of expectation. I think that the historical brick and mortar retailers have Competitive market treated delivery as kind of a necessary evil. It's offered for free. The salespeople can negotiate it out of the deal to close the transaction, this type of thing. And ultimately, the back end of that transaction is a very specialized delivery, specialized skill set, often with a two-man crew. So it's very expensive. So this paradigm of shrinking the cost out, pushing that down to the carriers, impacting service quality, I think has to get solved. So there's a bunch of different thoughts around that. And I think just secondly, as a real macro level around fulfillment and capacity. So, lots of talk about omni-channel retail and fulfillment, huge, well-publicized investments from Home Depot to Lowe's to Walmart to Sears around really infrastructure investments and technology investments to really leverage their brick and mortar store footprint to get to same-day delivery or next-day delivery. And I think maybe a little more tactfully from a service expectation standpoint, the consumer, there's something to be said for next day delivery, but I think even more compelling, consumers are really driving retailers to want to be able to pick a 2 or a 3 hour time slot right there at point of sale, whether it's online on a website or in the store with a sales rep. And that causes no end of challenges on the back end to be able to fulfill that profitably. So I think these are kind of the key themes that we've been seeing that a lot of our retail customers and partners have been talking to us about.
Yeah, great list of things there. I think you're right. I think historically, absolutely, and I think for many retailers, kind of home delivery is the necessary evil, and it's been something that, what was an afterthought. The main objective was closing the deal and, getting the sale, and then it was something that, okay, how do we do this as cheaply as possible, kind of in the back end. I think that you talked about omni-channel and what's happening there. Again, another big topic that a lot of retailers are investing in. I think this whole area of home delivery and last mile delivery is a key component of that overall, strategy, omni-channel fulfillment strategy. And I think that's where I was coming from when I was saying, it's becoming more of a looking to leverage that as a competitive differentiator. I think as part of that broader umbrella. But you also talked about customer service, customer satisfaction, quality, and cost. I mean, I think those are all the key levers that I hear retailers, struggling with and trying to balance, all of that. You get to talk to a lot of retailers, obviously, and other companies that are looking to, either launch or improve their home delivery operations. I mean, what does the typical home delivery, user experience and technology landscape look like today?
Great question. It's actually changed fairly substantially over the last 3 or 4 years, thanks in large part to our good friend Steve Jobs and our friends at Google and the mobile revolution. I would say that what is rapidly becoming the industry standard for and typical for today, kind of from a user experience and technology standpoint, I think there's, so from a consumer standpoint, I'm buying an appliance online as an example, or I'm in the store with a salesperson. They'll generally have a sense of inventory, and they'll generally have a sense of today's Tuesday. Hey, I think we can get it to you on Friday. So in their operations, I think pretty standard today is Thursday afternoon. At noon they'll have some level of routing software to load up all the orders, do the build the routes for the following day, curse the salespeople while they're doing it for selling too much because they don't have enough vehicles to fulfill it all. And then mobility has become fairly prevalent, I would say in a somewhat limited way, but typically today a driver will have a smartphone, download a route manifest, do turn-by-turn directions, but most commonly they'll still have paperwork. So the driver will have the device as a tool to help them, but to close the actual financial transaction, there's a signature on a piece of paper that's being carried back. And so I think the routing software for home delivery has been around for a long time. The big enhancement has really been around the mobile experience, getting a better understanding of whether a vehicle is ahead of schedule, behind schedule, being proactive with customers based on GPS in the field, these types of things. And I think that's the typical interaction that we're seeing today. I mean, that would Not everybody's there yet today, but I would say that's fairly industry standard today.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I've had a couple of experiences over the past year, whether it was we bought some furniture, and it still amazes me how wide those time windows can be. And how prevalent it is. Still where you have to forced to sit at your house for half a day or for 6 hours because they really can't tell you exactly what time they're going to be at the house. That's certainly been that's been my personal experience, and it seems like many retailers are still at that stage.
Yeah, and I think that I mean most commonly what'll happen is at point of sale, like you'll get a day commitment of, hey, we'll be there anytime on Friday, and then more and more so these days the route plan gets built the night before, and then you'll get an email or a phone call or a text message saying, hey, we'll be there between 9 and 11 or 9 and 12 tomorrow morning, and that just drives fairly large return rates. I mean that's anywhere, depending on the business, between a 15% and a 30% return rate due to damages, and in large part due to no homes. And so it goes back to what we kind of described earlier, is really let that consumer pick that tighter window at point of sale to improve the customer service experience, but also drastically improve the probability of them being home.
Great point. Great. You touched upon mobile, and I want to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But first, let's talk about just broader speaking, technology in general and the role that technology is playing in home delivery. Are the capabilities that companies need for home delivery different than the capabilities that's required for B2B distribution? And if so, what's different?
This could be a 45-minute dissertation here, so I'll have to be a little bit careful. So yeah, the short answer is yes, absolutely, and I think they're vastly different. So if you look at a typical, as a generalization, talk about a B2B distributor, whether it's food or beverage, industrial supply, whatever it would be, there's a fairly fixed customer base and a general rhythm of delivery. So if I'm XYZ food distributor, a sales guy doing a deal with a new customer, I understand that they want delivery twice a week. I kind of look at where my other customers are, what the schedule looks like, and negotiate to slot them in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then there's just day-to-day management of let's look at what the route plan looks today for tomorrow, and go ahead and manage any exceptions. So there's a general flow of business that's really built around a fairly fixed or a more static customer base. I think the overwhelming differences with home delivery are obviously the dynamic nature of the problem every day. And every day is a new adventure because you don't know who's going to order from you. And again, back to what I said at the top, I think getting to, there's a huge challenge around committing this 3-hour window at point of sale. That's where consumers are taking retailers today. And that's significant, and poses significant challenges, just because if you're committing a 3-hour window to everybody, you're going to be chasing your tail on the back end, trying to fulfill all those, driving all over the place. So I think that's really where the main differences lie, and it's driving a whole bunch of technology innovation. So the technology deployment and the look of the technology is very different. So if you'll allow me, I can spend a couple minutes on that if you like.
Sure, no, absolutely. Let's go into those, some of those high level details in terms of how it's different.
Yeah, and I think if you that in the B2B example, there's, and the traditional model even in home delivery today is and to take it down to a technical level, is a kind of a batch routing. So the typical problem is it's 3 o'clock today for tomorrow. I'm going to load up my orders. I'm going to click the button. I'm going to build my routes and then go ahead and execute them. And I think when you want to offer, let's call it a 3-hour window at point of sale, the fundamental challenge today is that the scheduling process at point of sale is completely disconnected from the back end logistics routing process. So if we're to work through an example, a typical example, right? So if I'm a retailer, I generally know based on my historical demand that there's I send one truck into Lower Manhattan, and so I can generally offer 4 AM windows to anybody that wants them in Lower Manhattan at point of sale. And so that's just based on history and general assumptions. And when you work through the example a little bit, let's say there's two very large, complicated deliveries at opposite ends of Lower Manhattan. That normally means that you're going to have a service failure miss on the other two, or you're going to have to send another truck out and incur more cost. So it comes down to the main premise that whatever is allowing these slots to be booked at point of sale is totally separate from what's happening on the back end. And I think this is, as you said, I mean, the home delivery last mile problem has become a very hot topic over the last several years, thanks in large part to Amazon. And I think this has driven a lot of technology innovation from software vendors to think about the problem differently. And the result of this has been this idea of continuous optimization or real-time optimization, where essentially the optimization is running continuously from the point of sale onward. And so to talk through the Manhattan example, again, I think if let's say I were to order and I were to get a 9 to 12 slot committed, and then my neighbor were to order, when you're going through the online checkout to buy your appliance or whatever it may be, and click for, I want to take a look at my delivery options, actually having the true route optimization tied in at that point in time to, as soon as I click, let's see what my options are, check what the actual routes look like at that point in time, and do all the drive time, unload time, vehicle capacity, and actually have the system come back and recommend, hey, here are all the feasible slots with their associated logistics costs. So all of a sudden at point of sale, the point of sale retail system now understands what reliable time slots are available because they were validated, and what the associated logistics costs are. So that's extraordinarily powerful, because the retailers can now start to play games to say, well, I can give my customers great choice and give them a choice of time frames, but at the same time, I can only offer them the ones that make good logistic sense to build density for myself on the back end. So in my example, if I've got a 9 to 12 commitment and my neighbor were to go online to order, it would come back and it would incent them in some way, whether it's do good for the environment by selecting this time frame, which is the same as your neighbor's, or actually offering them a discount to select that slot. There's flexibility to offer great choice and also build density on the back end. So I think from a technology innovation standpoint, this idea of continuous and real-time optimization is very, very different from the old world of batch optimization, and it's I think today we're on, call it the early adopter curve, but that it's definitively going to become the de facto standard.
It sounds like, continuous optimization is really the foundation, or at least one of the key enablers to addressing one of the key challenges that retailers and others have with home delivery, which is how to do it profitably. So it seems like that's a key tool, key capability, as you just said, to be able to drive behaviors to create that density, to perhaps even charge more or less to, again, try to manage that cost side of the equation.
Absolutely. I mean, to take it up a level, it's all about really tying the optimization into the point of sale, so you can provide visibility to here are the time frames and the logistics cost. I think that's the key, and the technology enabler is ultimately this idea of continuous optimization, where you're continuously, the optimization engine is continuously working on the problem over time and is essentially getting asked questions periodically by the point of sale system. So I think in our funny little logistics last mile space, that's by far been the largest technology innovation over the last several years.
Now, I've heard of continuous optimization now for years, and I don't want to get too technical here, but would it be fair to say that it's the time is right now, because of all the advancements in computing technology, in software architecture, so on and so forth, that maybe, while they might have been discussed years ago, from a technical standpoint, probably wasn't as feasible because the state of, computing power and the architecture involved just wasn't there yet to do it feasibly, quickly, scalably, so on and so forth?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the notion has been, and again, I will bear with me on the technical details a little bit. The notion has been around for a long time. I think it makes logical sense. But actually cracking the code on changing the optimization problem from single PC sitting on the router's desktop to an N-tier web services architecture where the optimization problem is actually distributed. So you can be continuously working on ultimately hundreds of thousands of orders at the same time across multiple CPUs is ultimately the surrounding enabling technologies have definitely made it the right time over the last several years, absolutely.
So you talked, you kind of gave some kind of high level examples of kind of how this technology can be used in action. I mean, when you look at companies that are doing home delivery successfully, I mean, what are some of the what are some of their key attributes for success? Can you give some specific customer examples?
Sure. So I think back to my earlier comment around expectations, right? So I think there's a little bit of a thought process of, well, how can I actually change the game when it comes to the conversation around delivery at point of sale? So how can I make that a little bit more value added? So I think when we tie in this idea of continuous optimization tied into point of sale as the technology enabler to allow people to offer 2 and 3 hour time slots at point of sale, the question is what can you do with that? And I think one of the best publicized examples is the John Lewis partnership. They're a multi-billion-dollar retailer in the UK. They've got stores and they've got a fairly a large and a rapidly growing online presence. And what they did was fairly ingenious. They very simple in concept, but they implemented this idea of intelligent point of sale scheduling with optimization tied in. And what they offered, so if you were to go to the John Lewis website and order an appliance or a TV, whatever it may be, you'll immediately get options. And so you'll have an option for a 7 or an 8 hour delivery time frame, and that'll be free. And if you want a 2 hour time frame or a 4 hour time frame, they charge a premium for that. And so they have the technology to be able to do that profitably because the time slots they're offering, they know they're not going to lose their shirt on. And so they've managed to turn delivery into a revenue stream where they found that a large portion of their customers are actually picking and paying the $30 or $40 or $50 premium, depending on the size of the time frame, to actually lock in a tighter time frame right there at point of sale. And on the back end, because those time frames are being served up and they're building density on the back end, they've actually managed to increase revenue and decrease their delivery costs. They actually reduced about a mile for every delivery that they're doing, which amounted to $2 to $3 million a year. So that's I think one of the early adopter examples of a fantastic implementation to, how do you get to more profitable delivery? Well, you think about how you can recoup revenue on the front end and make sure you're covering yourself for density on the back end. So I think that's the best example I can think of a fantastic implementation.
Great example, and I have had the opportunity to read some information on that case study, which brings me to another question. Just thinking about home delivery across different geographic regions, because I get the comment sometimes that that maybe the home delivery process is perhaps a bit more mature in, let's say, the UK or in other areas where you've got more density around populations and things like that. Just your thoughts, perspective on kind of the state of home delivery in the U.S. versus perhaps other places overseas.
Yeah, so I think you can get into some tactical. Do I own the vehicle? Is it contracted out? So there's philosophical differences worldwide. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Really, one of the main challenges in the U.S. is coverage, so and capacity. So the philosophical notion that's generally the go-to-market standard in the U.S. is to outsource this to a dedicated third-party provider or a specialized third-party provider. And there's the challenge in the space that's been fairly widely publicized. A.T. Kearney and others have studied this. I think there isn't one. There isn't an equivalent UPS or FedEx for specialized home delivery. So if I'm a large e-tailer or a brick and mortar retailer looking to get specialized nationwide coverage, I'm ultimately having to go and look for multiple providers in different markets and deal with their different contracts, different processes, different service levels, et cetera. So I think ultimately geography and coverage drives that. And at the same time, that lends itself to significant opportunities for investment to consolidate that space. And I think some significant technology innovations around collaboration and sharing of capacity among providers.
Great, thanks for the insights. Let's go back now to mobile technologies. You kind of touched upon it earlier, and so it's another big area in the logistics space, the transportation space, and how, and really in supply chain in general, how mobile technologies have the capability and are transforming a variety of business processes. How can mobile technologies transform or improve home delivery?
So I think in the State of the Union today, I think that it's an opportunity. It's mainly used for driver performance. I'm going to build a plan, and then I've got a driver with a mobile device that's GPS enabled out there, so I'm making sure that drivers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So there's a nuts and bolts operational opportunity. But I think from a consumer experience, having a real-time connected GPS-enabled device in the field allows folks to really transform and differentiate on the customer experience. So if I picked my 3-hour time frame at point of sale, I can now get notified. I can now log in online and see the real-time updated ETA of when the driver is going to be at my house. I can get a text message or an email 30 minutes before delivery automatically based on where the driver is, with a picture of the driver, so you understand what that looks like for any security concerns. You can be notified if the driver is running behind schedule, and then as soon as the driver pulls away, you can automatically get a survey. While there's high emotion around the delivery, the folks are home, and trigger an automated survey with 5 simple questions to really validate the experience. So I think all of these components are in play and I think becoming more and more popular. And it lines up very well with the consumer's conditioning and natural thirst for general information available in the internet age here.
I really like that, in terms of the end customer experience, because I think that is a key element of home delivery, and really that is the last touch point with the customer. And everything up before then, the looking at the product, the sales experience, everything, all that could go perfect, but the last thing a customer will remember is the home delivery experience. If it was negative, if it arrived damaged, if they made them wait, if they were late with the delivery, if there was some kind of negative overall experience with it. I think the ability to leverage mobile or other capabilities to enhance that end customer experience is certainly something that I hear a lot of retailers, is part of what they're looking to achieve and kind of make home delivery a much better experience overall.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's and it's going to continue to evolve, I think. So I think the customer service benefits and frankly the accountability benefits of let's really get a true sense of what happened at the customer across my 20 home delivery providers. So it's no longer a black hole of what actually happened with the experience. I mean, so the benefits are fairly widespread. I will say one thing I find fairly interesting. I think there's certainly a large focus on the customer experience aspect to leverage mobile. One area of opportunity that hasn't really been exploited yet is truly getting to mobile transactions. So I'm still shocked at the number of home delivery providers that are requiring paperwork, even though the driver may have a mobile device. So I think, and you get into integration issues with the host system and all these things, but I think that's really if we were to look at our customer base for customers doing this, I think I would say 90% of them are mobile enabled. And of that 90%, a very small percentage are actually paperless. And so I think that's a growing trend of actually marking, scanning all the product off, marking any shorts and damages, taking photos of damages, taking photos of a successful installation, and actually having that feedback automatically to close out the transaction. I mean, it gets to a little bit of tactical operational savings, but getting rid of the paper, the manual labor, the revenue recognition, there's a whole stream of benefits that retailers are going to continue to evolve and unlock.
Yeah, that point just touched upon kind of what was going to be my next question. But before I ask it, I just want to remind those of you that are joining us today live that if you do want to ask a question, now is the time to do it. I've got a couple, kind of running short on time here. I've got a couple more questions for Andrew. So if you do have a question, you can go ahead and do so via the submit a question button. So Andrew, you just touched upon here an area for future improvement and development. So I mean, looking forward toward the future, what does it look like for home delivery? What new innovations or challenges should companies expect?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, at the risk of sounding a little mundane, it's a little bit of a summary of what we've talked about. I think to summarize a little bit of what we talked about, I think the technology's cost effective and fairly easy to deploy these days to crack the code around 2 and 3 hour time windows at point of sale. So I think that's in the early phases of adoption, and that's going to continue to grow rapidly. Talked a little bit about leveraging mobile and leveraging all the benefits of mobile, not just some basic customer service elements. And I think maybe a little bit bigger picture, I touched on it earlier, there's a real problem today around capacity. If you take a simple example, the typical interaction of a retailer with a carrier is, hey, Mr. Carrier, I want dedicated service. I want you to be dedicated to me. I only want you touching my freight, so you're specialized and you know my stuff. And I can commit to you that 4 days a week I'll give you 1,000 deliveries, and then the other 2 days a week I'm going to give you 200 deliveries just because that's how my customers buy. And this causes a natural challenges with pricing, mismatching of supply and demand. So I think there's a huge opportunity for collaboration amongst carriers. And at the risk of, maybe a much longer conversation, at the risk of simplifying and commoditizing it, if you think of the Expedia of home delivery and what I think you may have had Art on here a couple of months back talking about this idea of a trusted network. But if I'm a retailer and I have a trusted network of 3 providers in a market, if my primary provider doesn't have capacity on a certain day, I then have another trusted provider that I can seamlessly pitch capacity to. So this idea of a collaboration platform to close the gap between supply and demand, I think is a very interesting opportunity that's going to get exploited here in the near term.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about the kind of the Expedia model for this, but certainly I think you talked about it before. I mean, it's the fact that there's no such thing as a nationwide courier, right, or provider, like you have in other modes of transportation. So certainly there's a lot of opportunity for innovation there. Andrew, we're kind of out of time here, so I'm just going to get right to my last question, and just kind of as a way to wrap up, so if I'm a retailer, I'm another company that's looking to kind of get into home delivery or improve my operations. I mean, what questions should I ask myself to assess if my home delivery capabilities are best in class, or if I need to, if there's room for improvement?
Well, it's a fairly long list. So I think in brief, it starts with delivery and management of carriers. What is my geographic footprint? Should this be insourced or should this be outsourced? I think the market's mature is financially the best way to go. So I think that's number one, that I think a a bunch of folks are still struggling with. And then really it's about an assessment of who their customer is and what they're looking for and how they want to buy and what they value. And so tying in the elements that are really important to their consumers. And I see a lot of retailers forget to do this, where they rush to kind of the trend of what others are doing without really thinking about their specific consumer. And so we're really thinking about what's important to the consumer at point of sale, and what's important to their consumer in terms of the actual physical delivery experience. I think retailers will be surprised that the answers will be slightly different across a vertical, and I think getting to those answers will help drive what the best experience is out of some of the building blocks that we talked about today.
Excellent. Andrew, we, like I say every week, with whatever topic we're talking about, we only get to, kind of scratch the surface, but you really provided some great, insights and food for thought around what's happening in home delivery and what the future looks like. So, thank you very much for your time and for, sharing those perspectives with us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And we didn't get any questions live today, but if you're watching this on demand and you do have a question or a comment for Andrew, you can search for this episode at talkinglogistics.com. Go ahead and find the episode, and you can post a question or comment there, and I'm sure Andrew will be more than happy to respond via that platform. With that, again, thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.